Hi, I'm Groundbreak1, and this is Midgardia's Cool Crowdfunding Show. I'm here today with James. How's it going?
Going very well, yeah. Been an exciting time. Bit very busy, but everything's going great.
So you're here to tell us about Lorescape, so why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Lorescape, that's our company and our project. It's a modular hex terrain system for RPG games, war games, and stuff like that. And basically, what it is it's a tile-based terrain system, but which is familiar to anyone who's played kind of tabletop gaming. But the unique feature is that the terrain is completely modular and customizable, so everything comes apart and everything goes back together in whatever order you want. So it's got a degree of customization and detail. I don't know how well the camera's going to get that, but it's got a degree of customization and detail that is basically combines sort of the high quality graphics of something like Castle Cone or games like that, but with the kind of physical modularity of um, other existing hex systems that don't have very nice graphics, and I shan't name them so I don't get in trouble. But everyone knows who they are. So yeah, so it's a fairly kind of generic system for fantasy gaming and wargaming, but it is sized for BattleTech and also to be compatible with sort of D&D hex conversion rules and stuff like that. So we're those are our two main games, I'd say, amongst our backers. But there's a massive variety of games that can be played on it. Even things like naval warfare games. There's a Age of Sail game that can be played on it. So all kinds of things. The idea is that you have one set or a collection of sets, and it isn't just for one game in your collection. So you don't have to buy a new terrain system or new bits and pieces for each individual game, and then don't use them for 2 years. You can take this one apart after your D&D session, rebuild it into a BattleTech map, stuff like that. So it's to try and make it a little bit more universal. Not a completely universal system, but like towards that goal.
And you've got two scales for the hexes, if I'm remembering right. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. So we have the one I just showed, which is a basically an overworld map, just a outside, which is 15 foot per tile, which 5 meters per tile, and that's what we call tactical scale. And that's mostly for kind of wargaming, but also useful for kind of traveling around or exploration in a D&D or fantasy RPG type game. And then we have combat scale, which actually have some over here. Combat scale is very much dedicated for RPG gaming encounter maps. So this is a tavern set, for example. It's not built in a way that makes any sense because these are just how it arrives. But these tiles all come apart and you put them back together to create a custom tavern. We also have caverns, temples, castles, various things like that. So you can travel around on the overworld map that you've built, and then you can reach a point of interest or an encounter, and the DM can bring out a pre-made encounter map, which at the end of the session, if you're not going to continue in that place, you just take it apart and make it into the next one in a completely different shape and size. So those are the two scales.
Wow, those seem really versatile. And it seems like they've got a lot of really nice detail on them.
Yeah, it's just flexible. So if any kind of crazy someone built a hexagonal bar out of it, even though we went to a huge amount of effort to put square rooms onto hexagonal tiles, which is as difficult as it sounds. And then the very first thing they did is arranged it so it was hexagonal again. But I guess that's the joy of it, is that you can make it the way you want it to be, even if it is counterintuitive. Yeah, that's the main thing, is to give players choice.
So what was the impetus for this project?
I wanted this, and it didn't exist. Yeah, I was looking for some tiles, and at the time, what I was thinking was Warhammer 40K, because when I was a kid, I grew up playing third edition, and back then we used to make a lot of maps with a lot of elevation and cool features and hills and things like that, and that's really died out in modern Warhammer gameplay. I don't remember what edition we're on now, eighth or something. I don't remember. 10th, yeah. And I don't play anymore, so I lost track. But I was thinking of getting back into it. But one of the things that put me off when I was watching videos and YouTubes and stuff is that it seems to have become distilled down to like competitive style gameplay, where you have these fixed maps with flat scatter terrain and balanced maps to make it fair. Um, and I was kind of put off by that because what I really enjoyed about when I played Warhammer was playing ridiculous battle scenarios, you know, single Space Marine squads facing down hordes of Tyranids or whatever, just in a totally weird and uneven map, and you build the map yourself out of polystyrene and model paint and things like that. So what I was thinking is we'd make a hex terrain system where you could make a Warhammer 40k map with real terrain and real elevation and things like that. But we actually moved away from that idea because Warhammer players don't want that. I don't think in general they want flat maps and the scatter terrain because that's what they're used to. That's what everyone does. And secondly, because I actually kind of lost my enthusiasm for getting back into Warhammer and started looking at, okay, well, actually there are some other games that this would be really suitable for. And the one that really jumped out was BattleTech, which is why it's scaled for BattleTech. And then also because I was thinking for a while about getting into D&D, which I haven't done since I was a kid as well. And then really that's when it occurred to me that actually if we change the scale down, you could make really nice D&D encounter maps. Because when I was looking at that, I saw that a lot of people are playing on paper hand drawn maps and things made of cardboard, and it's this D&D is this incredible game with all the imagination and effort that goes into the characters and the story and everything. And then it seemed to me, and people buy ludicrously expensive dice and dice towers and trays and all this equipment, and they dress up and they go to conventions and they spend an enormous amount of money, and then they play on hand-drawn paper maps a lot of the time. Not everyone. Plenty of people out there who do cool other map systems, but there's a lot of people, the map just seems to be the part of the experience that hasn't been done right yet for a lot of people. If you've got a huge budget, you can do stuff like Dwarven Forge, and I love Dwarven Forge. They make incredible products, but it's not in everyone's price range. So I wanted to make something that was cheap and flexible, or affordable and flexible, that you could introduce into pretty much any D&D setting, and make really cool maps out of it, take it apart, and make really cool maps out of it again the next session. And so that's what it moved into from originally thinking I was going to put Space Marines on it, which I have done, but it's no longer the focus.
I used to play Warhammer 40k 3rd Edition myself way back in the day. We used to set up our terrain on a air hockey table. Not with the air hockey table turned on, though. Maybe that'd be good for a zero gravity scenario.
That would be crazy. Yeah, that would be chaos. That would be chaos. Hexagons are the best of guns. I wish I could hold them all up to the camera. I don't have everything available at the moment. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to risk ruining the video by taking you over there. So there's a map set up over there, which shows we got sort of coastal grasslands with tracks and things, barren lands, which is like a wasteland type map, and then we've got a mountainous biome with frozen forests and waterfalls and things like that. So those are the kind of the basic ones. But the Kickstarter has been kind of all about stretch goals, introducing new things. So now we've got marshlands coming up. We've got volcanic biome. We've got Arctic biome. We've just unlocked, or we just said we're going to unlock in the future, a sort of urban biome, which is more kind of BattleTech oriented. And then in the combat biomes, we've added temples, streets, castle, and we're also doing a Shadow Realm tactical biome set. So that's more like a specific kind of D&D and maybe Pathfinder style map, a sort of underworld, corrupted realm type thing. I think Shadowfell is the D&D name for that.
The tactical scale maps seem like they'd be really handy for a hex crawl kind of campaign.
Yeah, so Hexcrawl is a really interesting one because the ability to take the map apart and sort of rebuild it as you go lends it into basically sort of hexagonal Minecraft, procedural generation. And one of our beta testers, they've done exactly that, where they had 600 tiles or something, but they wanted to do a hex crawl, and 600 tiles isn't enough to build an entire hex crawl sort of universe. So they would just basically have a kind of general rule that you're heading west, or whatever it was, in one direction, and they would go through and encounter all this stuff and discover things. And then as they progressed, the DM was just kind of shuffling the map along the table, taking apart the piece that they had already traveled across, and then rebuilding it in front of them as they went. So that they're just live procedural generation on the table in front of the players, which I think is really cool, because we hadn't tried that before in our own testing. And it sounds horrendously complicated, but they really enjoyed it and said it worked well. So I think that for a hex crawl type situation, it could be something that doesn't exist at the moment. Like, there isn't really any other way of doing that without just bringing out bits of paper that you've drawn on earlier. Yeah, there are different ways you can organize the procedural generation, whether it's just the DM making it up, or whether there's some structured system for what appears next. And then it's only a question of what tiles are available and what the DM and his group happen to own. And if they don't own the right tiles, we're happy to help them with that.
The Lorescape tiles seem to stick together really well. Could you like hang your map on the wall when you're not using it between sessions?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So the tiles are sort of like almost like a kind of pixelated molding clay. You can just take them apart and build them into kind of any structure, and then you could hang that quite comfortably, like you say, on a wall or whatever, and save it for the next time. So they go together, easily, but also they form a nice strong connection. There was a lot of work went into that, and that is a kind of a new feature. Most terrain systems, to get into the engineering of it, most terrain systems use basically an interference fit, where you have an item on one side that goes into a fixed shape hole on the other, and you're relying on the friction and the pressure on those two sides to just kind of jam it in place. And the problem with that is that if it's very slightly too big, it will just jam and it will be horrendous. And if it's very slightly too small, it will just fall straight through. So what we use is more like a spring system, where you have two parts that go together, and try and get the camera orientation right. Two parts that basically cling to each other. And now, if there's a slight variation in size, they still connect. So plastic molding, there's always a variation in size. And over time they wear, or they shrink or move very slightly, they get damaged. So you need to have a system that accommodates that. And that's the new thing with this connection style that we've got, is that you basically get this very, very consistent fit between the tiles, which means you can do what I just did, where you can just take them apart and put them together like in a big block, and they're still strong, but it's not difficult to do. That's the magic spot of, like, it's not difficult to put them together, but it's difficult enough to take them apart that they stick together. Yeah, there was quite a lot of time, goes into that, because these are injection molded. So for anyone who's unfamiliar with that, it requires a big steel tool and a very complicated machine to do it. And so we had to make the tool and test it and go through a number of different iterations, because it was too loose or too tight, and then get to the perfect thing. And it also means that you can't really 3D print these, because 3D printers aren't accurate enough. And the 3D printed tiles actually have some. So I did try 3D printing them, and they're kind of okay. But what you'll get on a 3D printed version is that, where it's jammed in, and so it doesn't go until it goes, and it's incredibly unsatisfying to try and take apart and put back together. And the experience is ruined. So that's we've had other questions like, why don't you just 3D print it, or can I 3D print it, or whatever. And I was like, IP reasons aside, you just cannot 3D print this product. It doesn't work. So this is only, I know. Sorry. Yeah, so I know a lot of people are very much into 3D printing, and I've got a 3D printer over there in the corner. Fantastic. I love it. I print stuff all the time. But 3D printing is not going to completely take over high quality kind of industrial produced processes because of that accuracy issue.
Yeah, I've got some professionally 3D printed stuff, and that's pretty rough.
Yeah, it can be. There are some beautiful 3D prints that I've got from a very, very high resolution laser system that cost about $30 per tile, and they fit together very nicely. So we use them for prototyping, but they're $30 per tile.
So, what's the approximate price point for the injection molded tiles?
About 30 cents per tile.
And I assume you can use these just fine for games that don't require a hex grid.
Yeah, you can absolutely play games that don't require a hex grid on a map that happens to be made out of hexes. You get small issues if you're kind of like going up a slope and one move distance ends up half on one tile and half on another, but you can get around that kind of thing.
One of the nice things about tabletop gaming is that you can work around small issues like that as long as you all agree.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about the imagination and of the players and the creativity and the scales. For example, we have these two different scales, but for D&D, we're not producing trees at both scales because there's no point. It's just a waste of money having to buy two different scales of trees. So you can just use the bigger trees on the smaller map and just use your imagination to allow for the fact that they're slightly the wrong size. Because that all of us gamers, we're used to using our imagination to a much higher degree than that to imagine the scenario that you're in. So a little bit of suspension of disbelief, a little bit of mental flexibility is all you need.
So, what are the options for scatter terrain with Lorescape?
Yeah, so we're just starting to release all that. So what I just showed over there was one of the first social media stretch goals, which is clip-on rocks. So the tiles have a clip-on system integrated into them, which is open source, and so people will be able to develop and make their own parts for that completely freely. There's no charge, there's no cost, because one of the things that we've always known about the kind of big gaming companies is they're too defensive, um, and they try and own the whole process, and they try and own the modifications, and sure, you can paint, but we'll sell you the paint and all that kind of stuff. So they're trying to own the whole ecosystem. What we're trying to do is just create the base and then support people being in creative on top of it. So we've pre-made these little rocks, these clip-on rocks, and we're doing the same for trees. We're going to do some other stuff. We'll basically just keep producing things like that. We're doing dungeon entrances. We're going to do. I think we're going to do like a battlefield system with trenches and sandbags and stuff as well. So we'll just keep producing periodically things that clip onto the tiles, and also we'll be hosting community creations. So if people generate cool 3D objects that we approve of, we will, and I don't know exactly what the approval process will be, but there'll be some kind of filtering, some kind of approval process that we will then host it on our like official downloads page, because people are going to make some incredible stuff. People are going to make things that we haven't thought of, and we'll then help them spread that around the rest of the community. And anyone with a 3D printer or access to someone who has a 3D printer will then just be able to make them. It's pretty simple. It's just the tiles, the clip-on system, and then the kind of things that go on top of them, and the different sets. The simplicity is deliberate, because we're trying to be a generic system. And generic always sounds bad, but the point of being a generic system is so that you can play lots of different games on it. So we're slightly straying away from being too complicated or being specific to one thing.
We've mentioned D&D a few times, but obviously you can use this for other role-playing game systems.
Yeah, I'm being very offensive to all the Pathfinder players out there who are going to be upset that D&D is being mentioned and Pathfinder isn't, but it's equally applicable to Pathfinder. I'm just trying to think of we've got a list of games somewhere that we've sort of been through that would be applicable, and we're also going to be developing our own games for the system. So the first one is going to be a Viking tomb raiding game, where you build a map. There are 4 tombs, and the Viking party goes around, has to raid all the tombs and escape with the loot. and the DM has to stop them, and he has a load of fun and amusing ways of stopping them. It's kind of a comedic game, there's Loki and trickster stuff in there, and zombies and monsters and trolls and stuff. So we're going to release games so that people who already own the tiles can then just buy the game itself, the rules and the miniatures and things like that, and not have to buy a new set of tiles. We're also going to have collaborators who make native games, and we'll then support them to integrate them into the system so that there'll be a library of games that you can buy at pretty good value because they don't need to come with their own boards and stuff like that. And then you can just add that to your collection as you wish, and use the tiles that you already have, or add a few more if you need a new biome, or you want some tropical islands or some mountains or whatever. So there's going to be a whole kind of ecosystem of games building up around it as well.
I'm really looking forward to Viking Tomb Raiders.
That's a really fun game. We've got it to the point now where it's playable, and it's a laugh. Yeah, the having the DM aspect in a game like that is slightly unusual. Usually you kind of play against, a fixed rule set kind of AI type thing. But in this one, you have an evil game master whose only job it is to kill as many Vikings and make as possible and make their lives completely miserable. And there's respawns and stuff, so it's chaos. It's really good fun.
Congratulations on blowing your funding goal out of the water, by the way.
Yeah, that was crazy. We underestimated the demand for sure. Been a huge amount of support, which has been fantastic. Yeah, it's I think the problem with this is I've seen this kind of video a load of times. When you get people on, not you personally, but as in like interview, and they interview someone who's just had something that looks successful from the outside and is successful, and they go, "Oh yes, we're so blown away. We didn't expect it," and you never believe them. But actually, yeah, it's true. It's just like we were hoping to get roughly a third of what we've achieved. So it's been fantastic, and it just means that we've got more funding and more space to go and create new stuff. And it means that we won't have to go to one of the big gaming companies later this year and ask for investment and let them take control, because they'll want that for their money and stuff. It means we'll be able to fund it just with the player base pretty much anyway, and then that gives us way more flexibility and control over what's happening, and that's a really good thing to have. No selling out. Yeah. No, no, no problem. You do or you don't. We're in a fortunate position now where we don't need to put pressure, or there's no hard sell on anyone, because people who want it and can afford it can have it, and we've got enough backers and enough customers that we don't have to chase other people who don't and say, oh, you should get it now. There's no rush, no hurry, no pressure. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Thank you.
James, it's been great having you on. And for our lovely viewers, go look in the comments below. There is a link to the Lorescape Kickstarter where you can back it and get some awesome hex tiles for yourself and maybe your friends.
All right. Thank you very much.
Have a good night, everyone.